Forget massive scandals or embezzlement. In the modern workforce, your entire career can be instantly destroyed by a single typo, a blue ink pen, or a rogue piece of leftover fish. We compiled 50 terrifyingly petty reasons actual people lost their jobs. Watch your back, because your manager might be looking for a legal excuse to ruin your life over a crumbled cookie. 1. Getting canned over a haircut usually implies you showed up looking like a complete punk rocker. But one guy at a stuffy consulting firm was shown the door just for having a modern fade. We are not talking about a neon green mohawk here. The executives simply deemed his totally normal style way too trendy for their conservative office culture. Apparently, looking like you actually know what decade we are currently living in makes you an immediate and terrifying threat to their completely outdated business model. You can practically hear the upper management panicking over his fresh trim. 2. Taking a breather to inhale actual oxygen cost one corporate worker his entire livelihood. This perfectly healthy guy noticed his chain-smoking co-workers were getting 5 extra breaks a day, so he started stepping outside just to get some fresh air. When he argued he deserved the exact same amount of rest time, human resources violently disagreed and fired him on the spot. They firmly established that the only acceptable way to earn a 15-minute pause in modern corporate America is to actively destroy your lungs with tar and nicotine. Having a functioning respiratory system is clearly a massive liability. 3. Quality control is absolutely critical in the restaurant business, unless you work for a total maniac. A professional chef was abruptly handed his walking papers for the unforgivable crime of tasting a spoonful of his own sauce to check the seasoning before serving it. The restaurant owner completely lost his mind, aggressively labeling this incredibly standard culinary practice as unsanitary and outright theft of company product. They basically fired the guy running the kitchen for making absolutely sure the paying customers were not about to eat garbage. You really have to wonder how that genius owner expects his food to be prepared going forward. 4. Never make the mistake of reminding your boss that you actually work for money. One unfortunate woman received a brutal termination text message simply because she asked her manager what time her direct deposit would finally hit her bank account. Her supervisor proudly informed her that she had a horribly toxic attitude for caring so much about getting paid on time. It is truly mesmerizing how quickly employers get deeply offended when you politely remind them that this whole arrangement is a strict financial transaction. They honestly expect you to show up out of the pure, unadulterated joy of making someone else wealthy. 5. The fashion police are apparently moonlighting as banking executives these days. A highly paid financial worker was actually let go from his position for having the sheer audacity to wear white cotton socks with a dark business suit. The sacred employee handbook strictly specified professional attire, and management decided the specific color of his ankle warmers was a completely fireable offense. Honestly, it is incredibly comforting to know that our entire global financial system is being fiercely guarded by ruthless wardrobe critics rather than any actual economic regulators. You can crash the housing market, but keep those white socks hidden. 6. Displaying basic human compassion will absolutely get you punished if you drive for a living. An auto parts delivery guy was fired on the spot because he pulled over to help an 80-year-old woman shovel massive piles of snow off her driveway. Thanks to this incredibly kind gesture, he arrived back at the shop a grand total of 10 minutes late. His corporate overlords immediately decided that basic human decency was far less important than the timely arrival of a discounted brake pad. They handed him his final paycheck, sending a crystal-clear message that having a soul is strictly prohibited. 7. Delivering a massive mountain of pizzas to a local church seems like a safe bet, until you realize the Holy Spirit does not cover a 20% gratuity. A driver lost his job after he politely expressed his frustration over getting a $0 tip on a gigantic, exhausting order. Instead of just passing the collection plate to take care of the guy, the church actually called his manager to complain about his ungrateful attitude. It turns out that expecting to be fairly compensated for hauling 50 pounds of cheese up a flight of stairs is now considered incredibly rude behavior. 8. Choosing not to get instantly electrocuted is a serious breach of contract in the construction industry. A worker was unceremoniously fired because he flat-out refused to stand on a towering metal scaffold right in the middle of a massive, terrifying lightning storm. The site foreman pointed at the angry sky and told him to either get back up there and risk becoming a human lightning rod, or pack his tools forever. Naturally, the guy chose his actual life over a measly paycheck, and the company officially terminated him for job abandonment in the face of lethal weather conditions. 9. Japanese bureaucracy operates on a level of terrifying precision that is almost hard to comprehend. A city official over there was severely punished and publicly shamed because he had the sheer audacity to start his lunch break exactly 3 minutes early to go buy a bento box. They actually held a nationally televised press conference to deeply apologize for his wildly scandalous behavior. Imagine having to bow in front of national news cameras and beg for societal forgiveness just because your stomach growled at 11:57 instead of high noon. The dedication to the clock is absolute insanity. 10. Customer service is always the top priority, right up until it takes an extra 3 seconds of company time. A coffee shop barista was let go because he started writing, "Have a nice day" on the paper cups instead of yelling out horribly misspelled names. The store manager pulled him aside and aggressively stated this friendly gesture slowed down the morning rush and ruined their highly curated brand experience. Trying to be genuinely nice to exhausted, caffeine-deprived humans is apparently terribly inefficient and deeply harmful to the bottom line. God forbid a customer feels a brief moment of actual joy. 11. Having a functioning moral compass is a massive liability in the tech world. A talented programmer was fired because he flatly refused to secretly install tracking spyware on his own co-workers' computers at the urgent request of his boss. He brought up extremely valid ethical concerns and politely mentioned that spying on your staff might actually be a massive federal crime. His grand reward for protecting the team was being terminated immediately for failure to follow direct orders. Personal integrity is clearly a fireable offense when your department head is a paranoid control freak playing secret agent. 12. Breathing oxygen is completely optional if your coworker prefers to wear cheap cologne. One unfortunate woman lost her job simply because her severe perfume allergy caused her to cough uncontrollably during lengthy staff meetings. Instead of asking her oblivious coworkers to stop violently marinating themselves in discount body spray before coming to work, management decided the easiest solution was to just get rid of the person with the diagnosed medical condition. In that particular office environment, maintaining an unbreathable toxic cloud was prioritized over an employee's functioning respiratory system. You either inhale the chemical fumes or you pack your desk. 13. Corporate egos are so incredibly fragile they actually require a vertical safe space. A young intern was swiftly fired on his very first week just for stepping into an elevator that was secretly reserved exclusively for the company executives. The poor kid had zero idea about this unwritten rule, but the chief executive officer was unfortunately on board at the time and absolutely hated sharing recycled air with the lowly corporate peasantry. These guys make millions of dollars a year, but they will suffer a complete mental breakdown if they have to stand next to someone making minimum wage. 14. One wrong keystroke can send you straight to the unemployment line if your boss is cheap enough. A graphic designer was fired over a single, tiny typo on a promotional flyer that had already been sent to the printers. Instead of just eating the minor cost and reprinting the batch of paper like a normal functional business, the boss decided it was financially smarter to just throw the entire human being right in the garbage. Everyone on Earth makes occasional spelling mistakes, but apparently, missing one single letter is a completely fatal error in this cutthroat modern economy. 15. Sports rivalries are all fun and games until they literally cost you your ability to pay rent. A car salesman working in Chicago was literally fired for showing up to the dealership wearing a green and yellow Green Bay Packers tie. The owner of the lot was a completely obsessive Chicago Bears fan and loudly proclaimed that wearing those specific colors was a direct act of vicious insubordination. Just take a moment to imagine losing your entire livelihood just because a grown man in a cheap suit acts like a violent toddler over a game played with a leather ball. 16. Politeness is strictly a one-way street when you are dealing with a fragile chief executive officer. An employee was actually fired for having the sheer audacity to reply, "You are welcome to a quick thank you email sent by the big boss." The head honcho somehow considered it completely arrogant for a lower-level peon to speak to him directly without being explicitly asked a question first. The paper-thin ego resting at the very top of that specific corporate ladder is truly a magnificent thing to behold. You acknowledge their thanks politely, and you instantly lose your health insurance. 17. An armored truck driver was instantly fired because he literally pulled over to drag a trapped, burning driver out of a completely wrecked car. The security company violently claimed he had strictly violated protocol by leaving his highly valuable cargo unattended for 90 seconds. Apparently, keeping a massive pile of insured corporate cash perfectly safe is considered vastly more important than preventing a random citizen from burning alive on the side of the highway. Next time you see a horrific crash, just keep driving if you want to keep your dental benefits. 18. Your genetic facial structure can absolutely get you terminated if the aesthetic is not right. A highly efficient receptionist was fired strictly for having what management cruelly described as a severe case of resting bitch face. She was perfectly polite, answered every phone call quickly, and did her job flawlessly, but her natural, relaxed facial expression simply was not smiling enough for the front desk vibe. Getting fired entirely because of the unfortunate arrangement of your facial muscles is a brand new level of shallow corporate madness. Unless you look like a deranged, heavily medicated clown, you are a massive liability. 19. Your boss's bitter personal life can easily ruin your entire career without warning. A man was suddenly let go purely for having a small bumper sticker on his personal car in the parking lot that simply read, "I love my wife." His manager, who was currently suffering through an incredibly nasty and expensive divorce, claimed the sticker was extremely passive-aggressive and created a hostile work environment for him. Your ability to put food on your table really should not depend heavily on whether or not your boss is getting absolutely destroyed in family court. 20. Getting fired because of what happens inside someone else's REM cycle is peak workplace insanity. An office manager fired an otherwise perfect employee simply because she had a highly vivid dream that the workers stole cash from the backroom safe. There was absolutely no real-world evidence, no missing money, and no actual crime committed. But the deranged boss confidently stated she trusted her nocturnal intuition much more than objective reality. Next time your supervisor eats spicy food too close to bedtime, you might want to start aggressively updating your resume just to be completely safe. 21. Good deeds absolutely do not go unpunished in the cutthroat restaurant industry. A dedicated waiter was fired on the spot for sprinting out the front door to chase down a customer who had accidentally left a thick wallet on their dining table. The restaurant management viciously claimed he had abandoned his assigned section without getting proper written permission. This guy successfully returned a lost wallet packed with hundreds of dollars in cash, and his grand reward was an immediate and highly aggressive termination letter. God forbid you save a stranger from financial ruin when Table 4 desperately needs breadsticks. 22. Traditional banks are vastly more afraid of minor body art than actual financial collapse. A bank teller was let go because he completely refused to cover up a tiny, barely visible tattoo on his wrist with a giant flesh-colored bandage. He correctly argued that a crusty, peeling Band-Aid looked incredibly unhygienic and actually drew way more attention to his arm than the tiny bit of ink ever did. Human Resources did not care and fired him anyway. You can happily launder millions for cartel bosses, but a tiny anchor tattoo is exactly where they forcefully draw the moral line. 23. Corporate offices always value cheap pepperoni slices vastly more than actual human life. A fast food manager was fired for flatly refusing to open his pizza restaurant right in the middle of a massive, devastating hurricane. He rightfully told his teenage employees to stay safely locked in their homes instead of risking their lives driving across severely flooded roads. The executives, sitting comfortably in another state, quickly decided that selling 3 stuffed crusts was vastly more important than their staff avoiding a literal watery grave. Valuing melted cheese over basic survival is just standard operating procedure in fast food. 24. Stroking the incredibly fragile ego of a mediocre man is still considered a primary key performance indicator for women trying to survive in corporate settings. A woman was abruptly fired from her high-paying marketing job simply because she completely refused to fake a laugh at the CEO's blatantly sexist joke during a morning meeting. He later pulled her aside and aggressively claimed she brought down the positive energy in the boardroom. If your jokes are terrible, maybe hire a professional comedy writer instead of just firing the only person brave enough to not chuckle at your absolute garbage humor. 25. Public school teachers are apparently expected to live like actual cloistered saints the second they clock out. A middle school educator down in Georgia was completely forced to resign because a harmless picture of her holding a glass of wine appeared on her totally private Facebook page. Apparently, teachers are strictly forbidden from consuming any liquids that aren't tap water or organic apple juice, even when enjoying a summer vacation in Europe. The pearl-clutching parents who complained probably drink a box of cheap Zinfandel every night, but God forbid the person teaching their screaming children tries to briefly unwind. 26. Rescuing actual garbage is somehow a massive, unforgivable crime against local government operations. A city garbage collector down in South Carolina was officially fired for pulling a perfectly functional child's bicycle right out of a trash pile to give to a needy kid in his neighborhood. The local bureaucrats aggressively claimed that the bike instantly became highly protected city property the exact second it touched the inside of the municipal bin. This man literally tried to do a wonderfully charitable deed using discarded trash, and the soulless local government completely destroyed his entire career as a punishment. 27. Absolute technical innovation is usually rewarded with a remarkably swift kick right out the front door. A genius computer programmer managed to automate his own daily workload so perfectly that he could literally sit back and do absolutely nothing while his custom code did all the heavy lifting. Like an honest idiot, he proudly showed his managers exactly how incredibly efficient he had made their entire system, and they immediately fired him for gross laziness. Next time you invent a brilliant machine that does your job perfectly, just keep your mouth shut and enjoy the massive amounts of free time. 28. Stealing a fraction of a penny is the ultimate corporate betrayal if you work in building security. A guard was permanently relieved of his duties strictly for plugging his dying cell phone into a regular wall socket near his assigned desk. The wealthy property owner aggressively claimed the guard was maliciously stealing highly valuable electricity directly from the client. Someone actually sat down and calculated the exact financial cost of this horrific electrical theft, and it turned out to be vastly less than 1 single cent. Firing a man over a fraction of a penny truly defies all logical explanation. 29. Democracy is alive and well right up until your boss demands a mandatory campaign contribution. A woman working down in Florida was fired strictly because she absolutely refused to donate her own hard-earned money to a specific political candidate that her deranged manager blindly supported. He actually had the nerve to put a passive-aggressive handwritten note right inside her final paycheck stating her employment was permanently terminated due to her lack of team loyalty. Pay the boss's favorite politician or starve in the streets. It is totally your own glorious American free choice. 30. A crumbled, unsellable piece of burnt dough is apparently worth vastly more than a human career. A veteran bakery worker was ruthlessly fired for the unforgivable sin of eating a completely shattered, broken cookie that was actively being swept into the garbage can. The corporate overlords aggressively labeled this horrific incident as unauthorized grazing and severe theft of highly valuable company inventory. They genuinely valued a ruined piece of sugar destined for the local landfill far more than a loyal employee's entire livelihood and ability to pay rent. True corporate evil is protecting the trash can with absolute zero tolerance. 31. Your bodily functions are severely holding back company profits, and management is fully aware. A call center employee over in Norway was abruptly fired because his unhinged supervisors felt he spent way too much total time in the restroom over the course of an entire month. They were actually standing outside the stall tracking his daily toilet usage with a literal stopwatch. Let me tell you, when your employer starts aggressively auditing your personal bladder movements down to the exact second, you are no longer considered a human being. You are just a leaky biological robot, ruining their daily metrics. 32. Corporate America aggressively decides exactly when you are allowed to start a family. A woman was ruthlessly fired just for having the sheer audacity to get pregnant a little too soon after being officially hired. Her incredibly bold manager explicitly told her right to her face that her upcoming maternity leave would be highly inconvenient for their upcoming summer schedule. Since firing someone for being pregnant is massively illegal, human resources quickly disguised the termination as a series of totally fabricated performance issues just to kick her to the curb before she started showing a baby bump. 33. Forced. Highly awkward socialization is vastly more important than actually doing your assigned job. A highly productive office worker was fired for skipping a terrifyingly mandatory fun team lunch just so he could stay at his desk and finish an urgent project on time. The boss furiously claimed that his blatant refusal to socialize showed a massive lack of cultural fit with the core team. It is truly the ultimate painful irony to get fired for aggressively doing the exact job you were hired to do instead of eating cold, mediocre pizza with weird coworkers you can barely tolerate. 34. Displaying sheer excellence is a massive, terrifying threat to comfortable corporate mediocrity. One incredibly efficient employee was fired simply because he was finishing all of his assigned daily tasks way too quickly. His impressive working speed made the rest of his painfully sluggish team look incredibly lazy in direct comparison. So middle management quickly let him go just to magically restore the fragile team morale. Actively punishing top-tier performance just to protect the slowest workers is easily the fastest possible way to run any functional business right into the ground. Just stare blankly at your monitor to blend in perfectly. 35. Your personal liver health is absolutely not a valid excuse to skip happy hour with the executives. A top-performing sales representative was completely let go because he politely refused to drink alcohol during those horrific, mandatory after-work networking events. He didn't drink strictly for serious health reasons, but his frat boy boss claimed he was totally ruining the relaxed office vibe and therefore simply could not be trusted. Apparently, if you aren't completely willing to violently destroy your internal organs with cheap scotch just to impress a mid-level client, you clearly aren't a true dedicated team player. 36. An office worker was immediately terminated for the unforgivable crime of signing a completely meaningless internal memo with a blue ink pen instead of the mandatory black ink. The deeply unhinged department manager aggressively claimed this tiny splash of color was a blatant, malicious act of total disrespect toward official company documentation. Imagine surviving decades in the soul-crushing corporate grind only to have your entire livelihood instantly destroyed by a 90-cent ballpoint pen from Office Depot. You really have to wonder how these middle managers actually function in the real world. 37. Reheating old seafood is definitely a crime against humanity, but firing someone over it is completely wild. A marketing firm employee was swiftly fired for the cardinal office sin of microwaving leftover fish right in the middle of the crowded employee break room. While we can universally agree that aggressively heating up warm salmon in a shared, unventilated office space is absolutely horrific, entirely removing a human being's livelihood over their horrible lunch choice seems just a tiny bit extreme. I guess lingering aquatic scents are officially classified as a highly fireable offense in the modern employee handbook. 38. Personal social media boundaries absolutely do not exist in the modern, overly connected office environment. A woman was abruptly let go merely weeks after she completely ignored a pending friend request from her creepy older boss on a personal social media account. He wildly claimed that they clearly did not have a strong connection anymore, and the vital office chemistry was suddenly totally off. If your actual job security completely depends on whether or not you are willing to look at your manager's blurry vacation photos from Cabo, you need to run away from that company as fast as possible. 39. A low-resolution JPEG of a sleepy tabby cat is a massive threat to corporate brand identity. An administrative assistant was actually fired strictly because she set a cute photo of her own fluffy pet as her personal computer desktop background instead of using the highly sacred corporate logo. The deranged regional manager furiously claimed this horrific act of rebellion showed a massive, terrifying lack of absolute dedication to the core company values. Listen, if your multi-million-dollar business is genuinely threatened by a picture of a feline, your corporate cult has vastly bigger problems than the secretary's monitor. 40. A dedicated employee was shown the door immediately following the annual office potluck strictly because she brought a homemade lasagna instead of a sealed, store-bought item. The deeply paranoid human resources director violently claimed that eating an unverified homemade dish was a massive, uninsured liability for the company. They genuinely fired a woman just for spending her entire Sunday night cooking a massive, delicious meal from scratch for her completely ungrateful coworkers. From now on, just bring a bag of stale tortilla chips to the break room and keep your stable income intact. 41. Your personal hydration choices must perfectly align with fierce corporate loyalty at all times. A longtime delivery driver for Coca-Cola was instantly fired after being spotted out in the wild casually drinking a cold Pepsi on his personal lunch break while still wearing his work uniform. The beverage giant angrily claimed it was a massive, unforgivable violation of their strict code of conduct to ever be seen fraternizing with a direct competitor's sugary syrup. Even when you are completely off the clock and just trying to survive a hot summer afternoon, you must blindly consume the company liquid. 42. Showing basic human compassion to a child is now considered a massive legal liability. A veteran kindergarten teacher was immediately fired strictly for hugging a devastated 5-year-old student who was sobbing uncontrollably because her family dog had just died. The wildly paranoid school district had a brand new zero-tolerance policy regarding any physical contact in order to aggressively avoid potential future lawsuits. They literally prioritized avoiding a completely hypothetical legal headache over comforting a tiny grieving child in her moment of extreme emotional distress. Comforting a crying toddler is officially considered a massive career ender in modern education. 43. Physically looking incredibly busy is vastly superior to actually using your brain to pass the time. A polite front desk receptionist was fired simply for reading a paperback novel during a massive afternoon lull when absolutely zero phones were ringing and the lobby was dead empty. Her power-tripping manager aggressively classified this quiet activity as severe theft of company time simply because she wasn't staring blankly at the drywall like a lobotomized zombie. Allowing their staff to remain intelligent, functioning human beings is a massive threat to unhinged middle managers who demand constant, mindless visual obedience from their subjects. 44. Ignoring serious medical warnings for the sake of cheap office cake will cost a company heavily. A man specifically begged human resources not to throw him a surprise birthday party due to his severely diagnosed anxiety disorder. Naturally, they completely ignored him, threw the loud party anyway, watched him suffer a massive panic attack, and then actually fired him for his negative reaction. They claimed his hyperventilating ruined the festive office vibe. The absolute best part of this horrific story is that he immediately sued the company for disability discrimination and happily walked away with nearly $500,000. 45. Fixing a dangerous machine costs real money, but firing the guy who pointed it out is completely free. A veteran factory worker was fired immediately after pointing out a massive safety violation on the floor that easily could have severely injured multiple people. Instead of spending cash to actually fix the terrifyingly dangerous equipment, upper management just decided to quietly get rid of the annoying whistleblower. They confidently calculated that silencing the messenger was vastly cheaper than actually caring about basic human safety. Keeping your limbs attached is heavily considered a massive inconvenience to the greedy factory shareholders. 46. When your internal digestive system officially outstinks highly processed meat, your career is completely finished. A security guard stationed at a New Jersey pork roll factory was officially terminated for an ongoing, aggressive issue with incredibly excessive flatulence. The poor man desperately claimed it was an unavoidable medical issue, but management stated the horrific smell was actually bad enough to heavily mask the potent scent of the industrial sausage products. If your uncontrollable bodily functions become a legitimate, documented workplace hazard that actively competes with a literal meat factory, it is truly time to strongly consider seeing a doctor. 47. A piece of wrinkled paper worth exactly $1 is apparently worth firing a grown man over. A dedicated supermarket employee was permanently fired strictly for redeeming a manufacturer's coupon that he literally found laying near the cash register on the dirty floor. The wildly petty store management aggressively classified this terrible crime as the severe misappropriation of vital company assets. This guy instantly lost a totally stable, long-term job over a crumpled piece of paper that was literally just sweeping trash. The absolutely staggering level of corporate pettiness required here is honestly hard to fully comprehend. 48. Taking a classic workplace stereotype way too seriously can easily ruin a stellar career in law enforcement. A veteran sheriff's deputy down in Florida was actually fired just for bringing a massive tray of glazed donuts into a serious morning briefing as a lighthearted joke. His rigid superiors absolutely did not appreciate the sugary humor and immediately claimed the baked goods were a direct act of malicious insubordination. If you genuinely cannot laugh at yourself for 5 seconds while wearing a shiny metal badge and a heavy utility belt, you are definitely taking your local authority vastly too seriously. 49. The strict moral line in the restaurant industry is apparently drawn right at minor chemical hair dye. A waitress working at a local Hooters was swiftly fired simply for getting some subtle blonde highlights because it no longer perfectly matched the natural hair color listed in her original hiring file. The incredibly strict employee handbook vigorously demanded an absolutely natural, wholesome look from all the girls at all times. It is honestly completely hilarious and deeply absurd that this specific restaurant chain aggressively polices hair aesthetics, especially when you actually consider what the rest of their mandatory uniform covers. 50. Accepting actual cash completely against your own will is now classified as illegally soliciting funds. A retail store clerk was violently kicked to the curb simply for accepting a small tip from an incredibly stubborn older customer who aggressively insisted on giving it to him. The corporate policy strictly forbade all tipping, and even though the poor kid actively tried to refuse the money multiple times, the customer basically shoved it right into his hands and walked away. You literally get your entire career ruined just because a wealthy stranger decided to forcefully commit a random act of kindness. I guarantee someone watching this has a firing story way dumber than these. Go to the comments right now and name the exact pathetic, petty excuse a boss used to fire you or a coworker. Name and shame the industry. If you want more videos exposing just how absurd our world really is, hit that subscribe button and crush the like. Do it before HR writes you up.